Happy Halloween and welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name's Adam Riancho and it's Thursday, October 31st, week 9. We have a game between the Jets and the Texans. Who you going to start and who you going to sit? Leia's a bit camera shy, but me and her are the Bengals. That is my Halloween costume. And I got to be honest with you, I kind of dig it. This jumpsuit is pretty good. It's a pretty comfortable outfit, but I do have a bit of a gripe regarding tonight's game. Why are the Bengals not playing on Halloween? It's the perfect color scheme. I think they should be the official team of Halloween. It doesn't have to happen every year. The calendar doesn't always line up. But if you have a Halloween night game, please, NFL, give us the Bengals instead of the Jets. And unfortunately, we do have the Jets tonight against the Texans. And the Texans are pretty good, but they are very injured at the moment. Their injury report is rough. Stephon Diggs on IR, out for the season, and Nico Collins is out for another game. So there's a lot of pressure on Tank Dell to step up. It's a tough matchup against the Jets, and maybe it's all on the back of Joe Mixon, but he's without his backup Dameon Pierce, so Dare Ogunbowale may have to step in a bit more. In the secondary, they're also without Jimmy Ward and Jeff Okudah. He is yet to play this season. Two linebackers, Al Shire and Christian Harris, are out as well. Center Jarrett Patterson also out, so the Texans are pretty banged up. The Jets do have some injuries too. Guard Elijah Vera Tucker is out, but Morgan Moses, the tackle, appears to be coming back. He is questionable tonight. They have some injuries on defense as well, but for the sake of fantasy, the most important names would be Allen Lazard and Greg Zuerlein. Zuerlein has missed a lot of kicks, so maybe that's not the worst news. Maybe they need a new face in there, but Lazard will miss his second straight game, and that does consolidate some of the targets in the Jets offense. But that's it for the injury news. Let's get into the start-sit decisions, where the obvious name would be Joe Mixon of the Texans. He's going to get monster volume tonight. However, the matchup indicates he might not be that efficient. The Jets are league average, but they only give up 3.9 yards per carry, but a lot of volume, 105 rushing yards per game, another 26 in the passing game, and 4 rushing touchdowns over the last 5 weeks. So not the best matchup for efficiency, but the volume will carry him. I definitely think he finds the end zone. That's what he's been doing like crazy the last month. His last 4 games, Mixon does have 5 touchdowns, an average of 110 yards per game. And you know the volume will increase tonight to about 25, maybe 30 touches. I do see a potential 150-yard game for Joe Mixon. So he will be lights out. I kind of feel like I'm a little too low, but the Jets matchup is a little concerning on Thursday. Maybe they don't give him that type of workload. 30 touches would be a lot. But no matter what, you're starting him. No one is benching Mixon tonight. I'm also starting Breece Hall no matter what at RB12. You have to start him. It's still must-start territory, but I am downgrading him for this game. He got vultured on the goal line last week. Braelon Allen did score that touchdown. Very annoying when it happens, but he's usually safe in terms of floor. In his last 4 games, an average of 109 yards per game. So just like Mixon, about 110, and with less volume overall, but more catches, the floor is very safe, but only 1 touchdown for him in the last 4 games. So I would love to see that tonight. That would make me a lot safer in my decision to start him, but no matter what, based on where you drafted him, he will play well. The position is loaded this week though, so I do not think he's top 10, but a very high floor. He will give you at least 14 points in my opinion, should go over 100 yards with a touchdown. So I think he'll be fine. The Texans are kind of bad in terms of efficiency, allowed 4.7 yards per carry is what they give up, but only on 95 yards per game. So unlike the Jets, they usually have the lead and their opponent has to abandon the run. That is a big reason why it looks that way. But 4 total touchdowns the last 5 games, the odds are decent that there is a running back who finds pay dirt tonight. So Breece Hall is a good play tonight as always, but at RB12, maybe not his best game of the season. I do think it's a better matchup for Garrett Wilson, who is a player I am starting tonight as well. Also in the top 15 at wide receiver 13, I think he's a lock in your lineup. He's been a good player the last 2 games, even with Davante Adams, still maintains that number 1 receiver status in the Jets offense. An average of 8.5 targets, 5 catches, 87 yards per game. Very high yardage numbers over the last 2 weeks. No touchdowns yet, but this matchup could pay off. That is what they give up at a high rate. The Texans rank as a top 12 matchup, only 140 yards per game, 10.4 catches, but 7 total touchdowns the last 5 games is why they give up 28 points per week. So I do think Wilson will play well. I do think he's a good start tonight, and I do think he probably finds the end zone where that's been evading him, but he is still averaging 11.2 points per game without it. So high floor, very bust proof. I do trust him, and that ceiling is unlocked in this matchup. So that means it's also somewhat unlocked for Davante Adams. And after looking into the matchup, I did bump him up 3 spots overall. He's now my wide receiver 36 in the rankings. That is a decent flex play. Not the safest, it's very touchdown dependent, but the odds are a little better than average that it will hit. So at some point, Aaron Rodgers will connect with him, and it will be a very good stat line in fantasy. And this could be the game. There could be 2 touchdowns available for receivers from the Jets. So I do think at 36, he could crack your lineup, but not the most automatic start. Outside the top 30, if you have good depth, then you probably will be passing. So dependent on your situation, but also dependent on your situation for Tank Dell as well. I'd rather go Dell over Adams straight up. I have him at 33, but only 3 spots higher. They're basically in the same camp. And I do worry about Dell for the sake of yardage. He has not been good in his last 4 games, only averaging 31 yards per game. So that's why, even though he scored 2 touchdowns, he's only giving you 8 points per game. Without the touchdown, you get about 5. So Dell, not a safe play at all, but because Diggs is injured, you expect more volume. With no Nico Collins as well, he is their de facto #1 receiver. So yeah, he might get a few more targets, but he's also going to face off against Sauce Gardner, and I don't like this matchup at all for him. It does rank as a bad one. The Jets are bottom 3, number 30 in the NFL versus receivers in terms of fantasy points allowed. They give up an average of 19.3 points per game over the last 5 games, only 107 yards per game and 4 touchdowns. The touchdown is the only hope for Dell. So the odds are decent. It happens, and he is their #1 target. So I do rank him above Adams. It's kind of a similar situation with both of them. So I don't think either player goes over 50 yards tonight, but the touchdown probably happens, and that would give you 10 plus points. So Dell's still a decent flex play. I think you're probably starting him for the most part, but same with Adams. You could bench both if you have good depth at the position. I'm also starting both defenses tonight. I think the Jets and Texans are both top 10 options. I have the Jets 1 spot higher at number 7, the Texans at number 8. The Texans are not as talented as the Jets, but they are better coached, and I think they will keep this game pretty close. I don't think either team goes over 20 points guaranteed. It will be more of a low-scoring matchup, and on Thursday night, I think the Texans will lean on defense and the run game. So the Jets are going to be okay, but I think the Texans maybe force an extra turnover and win the game because of it. I do worry about Rodgers and some turnovers. So I would start the defenses here, both top 10. I think the Jets and Texans should be in your lineup tonight. But like I mentioned, I'm worried about Aaron Rodgers. He's my quarterback 24, and I would bench him tonight. He has not earned your trust, and I do think he throws some interceptions tonight. The Texans matchup is about league average, but they have forced 7 turnovers to quarterbacks in the last 5 games, 5 interceptions, and 2 fumbles. They only give up 188 passing yards per game, and you know Aaron Rodgers does not give you anything in the run game. So it's all going to depend on touchdowns for him. They have allowed 10 touchdowns the last 5 games, so there should be multiple scores for Rodgers, but I'm not convinced it actually happens. Maybe 1 is safe to bet on, but 2 for Rodgers is not always guaranteed. So this Jets team is just not safe to trust, and that's why I worry about it. I do think Rodgers will turn it over at least once in this game. So not dying to start him, but I do think he's a little better than Stroud, who I have a 1 spot behind him at 25. I don't trust Stroud very much without his receivers. So Tank Dell gets a terrible matchup, and who else is there to step up? It's Dalton Schultz and about nobody else. So unless John Metchie has the game of his career, what are you really getting from Stroud? I do not think he goes over 200 yards. The Jets only give up 179 yards per game in the first place. And while they have allowed 5 touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, only 1 interception and 1 fumble over the last 5 games. So maybe he doesn't turn it over. That will help them win the game. But I don't think he has a very good stat line. I don't think this is the week to be trusting Stroud in your lineup. So he's outside my top 20. I would actually rather start Rodgers, and I have him 1 spot above Mason Rudolph. This is not the week to trust Stroud. So I'm benching both of them. I'm also benching Dalton Schultz, but I understand if you are desperate at tight end, maybe Kittle's on bye for you and your league is very competitive at that position. Maybe Schultz is the best option off the waiver wire. But at tight end 17, I would bench him. I don't think he's the best play. I'd rather go Taysom Hill, Tucker Kraft, or Hunter Henry. If you have TJ Hutchinson, I'd rather go there as well. So Schultz at 17 should step up, get a few more targets, but he hasn't stepped up without Nico Collins. I do not trust him very much. So at 17, I'm probably benching him, and I'm definitely benching Conklin at tight end 22. With Adams on the team, he's no longer competing for that third option every week. It's now the fourth weapon, and even though Lazard is not playing, I don't trust Conklin very much. So needs a touchdown, I will pass, and I'm also going to pass on Braelon Allen in the same situation. Without a touchdown, he will not pay off. He's been bad without it. And at RB 47, I doubt he gets 2 touchdowns in 2 straight games. So no thank you, I'm not starting him. Almost unranked, but Ogunbowale does not crack the top 50. I was a little hopeful for Dameon Pierce, but I don't think Ogunbowale is as talented as Pierce, so not expecting much. Maybe he gets a few more touches than normal, but not enough to merit a top 50 rank. So he's unranked. I also did not rank the Jets backup receivers, Mike Williams and Xavier Gipson. Cannot trust him, not enough volume. Gipson scored a touchdown last week, but it was on his only target and only catch. So don't trust him. Mike Williams barely saw any targets, even without Lazard. No thank you with Mike Williams. I'm also not trusting any of the backups for the Texans receivers. Maybe John Metchie plays well, but I really doubt it. He's never done much in his career. I also don't trust Robert Woods or Xavier Hutchinson. It could pay off for one, but it is hard to predict, and I'd rather just avoid the risk. So no thanks there. It could possibly be the backup tight end, Brevin Jordan, who gets that touchdown. So no thanks with any of them. None of them are ranked for me, and I will keep them on the waiver wire tonight. So here are my start sit decisions. I'm starting Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson with confidence for the Jets. Also their defense. On the Texans side of the ball, 100% Joe Mixon is a must start. And I also think the Texans are a top 10 play. The Jets offense doesn't scare you. So these 5 players, a lock in your lineup tonight, I would keep them in the starting rotation, but some players to consider for the flex would be Tank Dell and Davante Adams. Odds are you probably have better weapons, but if you don't, I understand there are some injuries at play. Go ahead and start them. They are touchdown dependent, but the odds are not bad for it to hit tonight. So they're top 36, but not top 30. You could flex them. You don't have to. Dalton Schultz, only if you're desperate would I start him, but not the worst option at tight end 17, most likely on the bench. But players definitely on the bench are Aaron Rodgers, CJ Stroud, Ogunbowale, and Braelon Allen, Mike Williams, Xavier Gipson, John Metchie, Robert Woods, Xavier Hutchinson, and Brevin Jordan. Those are my start-sit calls for tonight's game. But my final score prediction would be that the Texans win by about a touchdown. My final score, 23-17. I trust the Texans a lot more than the Jets. The Jets are just a bad team. Organizationally, I don't trust them on a short week to actually have their shit together, and I don't think they'll be ready to play tonight. So even with the Diggs injury, it does help them, give them a slight advantage, but I just don't trust them at all. I don't think it works out. So they will turn it over, and with only 2 touchdowns, I just don't trust them. No thank you. The Jets will lose. Final score 23-17. They're probably going to be driving at the end of the game, down 6 to win it, and it won't work out. So no thank you. Not betting the Jets. Give me the Texans, who are shockingly underdogs in this game. The line opened with them as 1-point favorites. With the injuries, it's down to them as 2-point underdogs, and definitely give me Houston +2 with the points. They will win straight up. So I like that bet a lot. But the over-under is down to 42.5, and with all the injuries, I do think it's a defensive game. Give me the under. I have a 23-17 prediction, so that'd be 40 points. I don't see 20 points from both teams, so I do think that is the call. Give me the under and the Texans +2 to win straight up. But I also give you an over-under bet. It's on Underdog, so if you want to join me for tonight's bet, use code NICEANDBLUNT and get your first deposit matched on sign up by 50%. So if you put down $10, you get an extra $5 to play with. It goes up proportionally to what you deposit. But here is the bet. I have a second one, honestly, as an insurance policy, but here is the one I'm more confident about, more interested to show you. Joe Mixon, I think, will go over well above 100 total yards, and 100 yards rushing I think will happen. So give me the over on Joe Mixon at 99.5 rushing yards. I did increase this line. It was originally like 82 rushing yards. So really trust Mixon tonight. Definitely hit the over on him. I also think Garrett Wilson has been playing very well lately. I think he goes over 80 yards, and I hit the over on Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall got vultured last week, and on Underdog, they do have vulture protection. So if Braelon Allen does score a touchdown, this pick will be void, and I won't have to worry about it going against my payout. So there is some less risk involved here, but I do think Breece finally gets back in the end zone. Give me the touchdown to hit on Breece Hall. A little bit risky, but I do think it has a shot. Tank, Dell, and Stroud, I think, are tied at the hip tonight, and neither, I think, has a great game. So give me the under on Tank Dell at 50 yards receiving. The original line was about 61 or so, and I did decrease this down to 49.5. So I really do not believe Dell has a good game tonight. It's very touchdown dependent, and if he doesn't, then how is Stroud going over 200 yards? The Jets already give up less than 180 on average, and Stroud has very few weapons. If Dell is limited to less than 50, Stroud will also be capped to 200. So love these two picks together. I think if one hits, the other will as well, and that is a bit of a gimme in my opinion. So love this bet. $5 entry gives me a return of $3.24, and that is a pretty nice payout on $5. So it was increased with about every single player with the exception of Breece Hall. They're all scorchers, but $3.24 would be our highest payout of the season if it hits. Last week I had 4 of 5. The only one I got incorrect was Cooper Kupp. He only put up about 51 yards. I thought he'd go over 100. So I misjudged Puka Nakua's involvement, and that was the bad decision. Cooper Kupp did let me down last week. But I also have a backup tonight. I mentioned the Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall picks are a little risky, so I did have a second one for them. The odds that Wilson scores a touchdown are decent. So I hit the over on touchdown for Garrett Wilson, and then my prediction is that the Texans do score 3 field goals. So I increased the line on Fairbairn to 2.5, and I think he will hit 3. So I swapped those two. The other 3 are the same, and this is a separate $3 entry bet for 241. So pick whichever one you'd like. Again, if you'd like to join me with these bets on SignUp, use code Nice and Blunt on Underdog. The link is in the description. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. My name's Adam Riancho. It's been fun. Hope you have a happy Halloween. And from me and Leia, the Bengals, thank you for watching Nice and Blunt.